At the grand ballroom of Ward Enterprises, the chandeliers sparkled like falling stars, filling the room with golden light. Rich businessmen and elegant women laughed, holding their glasses of wine. The sound of chatter, music, and clinking glasses filled the air. Everything was perfect. Everything was beautiful, except for one person standing in the corner. Lily, the janitor, stood quietly near the service door, holding her mop and bucket. Her faded blue uniform looked completely out of place among all the glittering gowns and suits. She tried to stay invisible, cleaning up spills before anyone noticed. She was used to being ignored, used to hearing whispers behind her back. People never saw her as a person, just the cleaner, just the help. At the center of the room stood Ethan Ward, the young billionaire who owned everything around him. He had built his empire from his father's company, and was famous not only for his wealth but for his arrogance. He loved being the center of attention, loved seeing people laugh at his jokes, loved power. Tonight was no different. It was his company's annual celebration, and everyone was there to please him. "Ladies and gentlemen," Ethan said, raising his glass with a confident smirk. "To another year of success!" The crowd cheered and clapped. Cameras flashed. His assistant whispered something in his ear, and he chuckled. "You know," he said loudly, "I believe everyone here has a special talent. Some sing, some dance, and some—" He paused, pointing toward the stage where a grand piano sat. "Pretend they can play music." The crowd laughed. Amused by his playful arrogance, the pianist, a hired performer in a black suit, smiled awkwardly and continued playing softly in the background. Ethan walked toward the piano and tapped a few keys out of tune. "See, not that hard," he said, laughing. The people around him laughed too, not because it was funny, but because he was the boss at that exact moment. Lily stepped forward to clean a small spill near the drinks table. Her shoes squeaked on the shiny marble floor, and the crowd turned to look. Someone snickered, "Careful. The cleaner's ruining the party." She kept her head down, wishing she could disappear. But fate had other plans as she moved. Her mop handle accidentally tipped over a glass of champagne sitting on the piano. The golden liquid splashed across the polished surface and dripped onto the floor. The music stopped, gasps filled the room. Ethan turned sharply, his face twisting in disbelief. The crowd went silent and all eyes landed on Lily. I'm so sorry, sir," she stammered, grabbing napkins from a nearby table to clean it. Her hands shook as she wiped the mess. Her heart pounded in her chest. Ethan stared at her for a long moment, then suddenly laughed. It was not a kind laugh. It was sharp and cold. "Well, this is new," he said mockingly. "My janitor trying to ruin my piano." The crowd began to chuckle again, relieved they could laugh with him instead of at him. Lily's cheeks burned with shame. Her eyes glistened, but she said nothing. She kept cleaning quietly. The pianist looked uncomfortable, wanting to help her but afraid to move. Then Ethan said something that changed everything. He leaned against the piano, smirking, and said loud enough for everyone to hear, "Tell you what, if you can play this piano better than my musician, I'll marry you." The crowd roared with laughter. Someone shouted, "Good one, Ethan." Others clapped and whistled. It was meant to be a joke, a cruel one. Lily froze. Her fingers tightened on the napkins. Her heart ached as she stared at the shining piano keys. She used to play, years ago, before life took everything from her. Before her father's illness, before poverty forced her to quit school and take this job. She had once dreamed of performing on a stage like this. But now she was just a janitor being laughed at. Ethan looked satisfied with himself, proud of his joke. He didn't notice the way Lily's eyes changed, the quiet sadness turning into something deeper, something like fire. She didn't answer him, didn't argue or defend herself. She just bowed her head slightly, whispered, "Excuse me, sir," and walked away. The laughter followed her as she left the room, echoing in her ears like a cruel song. But as she walked down the dim hallway toward the service area, a thought burned in her mind. They think I can't do it, they think I'm nothing. Her hands trembled, not from fear but from the memory of music she had once loved, the feel of piano keys under her fingers, the way sound could express what words could not. Meanwhile, back in the ballroom, Ethan moved on. He raised another glass, laughed with his guests, and completely forgot about the woman he had just humiliated. To him, it was just another joke, another moment of entertainment, but to Lily, it was the spark of something much greater. That night, as the lights dimmed and the guests left, She returned quietly to the empty hall to finish cleaning. Her eyes fell on the grand piano once again, the same instrument that had been part of her humiliation. It stood silently under the chandelier's soft glow, almost calling to her. She hesitated, looking around to make sure no one was there. Then she took a deep breath and walked toward it. Her reflection shimmered on the glossy surface as she gently touched the keys. The sound was faint and uncertain at first, but even that single note filled her heart with memories. Lily smiled sadly, wiping away a tear. If only they knew, she whispered to herself. Her world had been filled with pain and loss, but in that moment, as her fingers lingered on the piano, she felt something awaken inside her. A part of herself she thought was long gone, and though she didn't know it yet, that night would change everything. The billionaire's mockery would soon become the start of a story no one could ever forget. The next morning, the office building looked ordinary again. The grand party was over, the lights were gone, and the laughter had faded, but for Lily, the memory of that humiliating night was still sharp. She walked into work quietly, just as she always did, wearing her simple uniform and carrying her cleaning tools. Her heart was heavy, but she kept her head down, pretending everything was fine. Everyone at the company seemed to know what had happened. Some people whispered when she passed by. Others giggled. A few even replayed the story for those who had missed it. "You should have seen her face," one woman laughed near the coffee machine. She almost cried. Lily heard them, every cruel word, but she said nothing. She had learned long ago that silence was safer than defending herself. In her small storage room, she changed into her work apron. The walls were gray and the light flickered. Her only comfort was a small photo pinned to her locker, her late mother, smiling, holding a little girl beside an old piano. It was her favorite memory, the day her mother had taught her the first song. Music comes from the heart. Lily, her mother used to say, when words fail, let the piano speak. Lily touched the picture gently, whispering, "I wish you were here." Mom every day felt the same. She cleaned the hallways, dusted the offices, and emptied trash cans. The employees barely looked at her. Some didn't even say thank you, but Lily didn't mind. She had stopped expecting kindness a long time ago. What she missed was the feeling of belonging, the feeling that her life had a purpose beyond survival. At lunch, she sat alone in the cafeteria corner, stirring her soup slowly. The other workers chatted and scrolled on their phones. She looked at them and smiled faintly, remembering how she once dreamed of being one of them. Someone who wore clean clothes, spoke confidently, and didn't worry about money. But life had been cruel years ago. Lily had been a music student. She practiced piano every day, dreaming of performing on big stages. Her teachers believed she had a gift. She even received an invitation to a youth music competition. But before she could attend, her father fell seriously ill. Hospital bills drained their savings. Her mother worked day and night, but it wasn't enough. Eventually, Lily had to sell the family piano to pay rent. That day broke her heart. It felt like she had lost her voice. When her father passed away, her mother's health declined too. Lily took the first job she could find, cleaning. It wasn't what she wanted, but it paid the bills when her mother died. Lily was completely alone, no family, no music, just work, sleep, and silence. That was her life now, until the party, until Ethan Ward's cruel joke reminded her of everything she had lost. His words kept echoing in her mind. "If you can play better than my musician, I'll marry you." The tone of his voice, the laughter of the guests, the shame she felt, it all stayed with her. She wasn't angry because of the insult. She was angry because deep down she knew she could play better. That night, after finishing her shift, Lily sat on a bench outside the building. The city lights shimmered across the glass towers. The wind was cool. She closed her eyes and imagined the piano keys beneath her fingers, her hands moving gracefully, the sound of music filling the room. For a few moments she felt alive again. Then she opened her eyes and sighed. "What am I doing?" she whispered to herself. That life is gone, but the thought didn't leave her. She kept remembering the feeling of the piano under her hands, the way people used to listen when she played, the warmth of applause. It was something she missed more than anything. Her talent was buried, but it was still there. Waiting over the next few days, Lily tried to ignore her thoughts. She focused on her work, mopping floors, polishing windows, making sure the office was spotless. But every time she passed the lobby, Her eyes would drift toward the grand piano standing there like a silent challenge. Its glossy surface reflected the lights. As if teasing her, it felt almost alive, as if it remembered her humiliation too. Sometimes she caught employees whispering near it. "That's where the janitor embarrassed herself," one said. "I heard the boss actually made fun of her," another replied. Their words stung, but she didn't respond. She had learned to endure pain quietly, but something was changing inside her, a quiet determination forming where shame used to live. One evening, when everyone had gone home, she stood alone in the empty lobby. The building was silent except for the hum of the air conditioner. The piano sat there under a single dim light. She walked closer, her shoes making soft echoes against the marble floor. Her heart beat faster with every step. She stopped beside the piano, staring at the keys. Her fingers itched to touch them, but she hesitated. What if someone saw her? What if she got fired? But then she thought about Ethan's mocking smile, the laughter, the humiliation, and suddenly fear didn't matter anymore. She reached out and pressed one key gently. The sound was soft but clear. It echoed through the empty hall like a whisper. She pressed another, then another. The melody formed slowly, uncertain but real. Her hands began to move faster, remembering patterns she thought she had forgotten. Tears rolled down her cheeks as the music filled the space. It wasn't perfect, but it was powerful. It carried her pain, her memories, her longing. In that moment, she wasn't a janitor. She wasn't poor. She wasn't invisible. She was Lily, the pianist, the dreamer, the girl her mother had believed in. When the final note faded, she sat there in silence, her heart pounding. She smiled through her tears. "I can still play," she whispered. "I can still be me." What Lily didn't know was that she wasn't alone. Someone had seen her from the shadows. Someone who would change everything soon. That night, as she walked home through the quiet streets, she felt something new inside her. Hope. Fragile but alive. For the first time in years, she believed maybe, just maybe, her story wasn't over yet. The next evening, the office building was quiet again. Most of the employees had gone home, and only a few lights glowed in the hallways. Lily finished her cleaning rounds early that night, but something kept pulling her toward the lobby. She tried to ignore it, but her heart wouldn't let her. The grand piano was still there, standing proudly in the center of the room, shining under the soft light of the chandelier. It looked almost magical, like it was waiting for her. She stood a few feet away from it, her hands trembling slightly. She looked around. No one was there. The silence of the building made her nervous but also brave. Slowly she walked closer, her old shoes making small squeaks on the polished floor. Her reflection appeared on the piano's glossy surface. She could see her tired eyes, her messy hair, her plain uniform. For a moment she felt foolish. A janitor standing in front of a piano worth more than everything she owned. But then she remembered the feeling of those keys under her fingers, the way the notes had sounded the night before. It had made her feel alive again. It had reminded her who she was. She took a deep breath and whispered to herself, "Just one song. Then I'll go." Her fingers touched the keys softly. At first she played a simple tune, the same one her mother had taught her years ago. The melody floated gently through the empty lobby. Echoing off the marble walls, it was soft, sweet, and full of memories. She closed her eyes, letting the music guide her. For the first time in years, her hands moved with confidence. They knew what to do, they remembered as she played. Her thoughts drifted back to her childhood. She saw her mother sitting beside her, teaching her how to listen. Not just to the music, but to her own heart. She remembered performing at school events, the small applause, the laughter, the dreams she once had. Tears filled her eyes. But she didn't stop playing. Her emotions poured out through every note. The music changed, becoming deeper, sadder. The sound filled the huge room like a wave, wrapping her in warmth and sorrow. The song told her story, a story of loss, struggle, and hope. It was as if her soul was speaking through the piano. She didn't need words. She didn't need anyone to understand, she just needed to play. But what Lily didn't know was that she wasn't alone this time. Upstairs, Ethan Ward was still in his office. Working late, his tie was loose, and his eyes were tired. He had spent the day in meetings, surrounded by people who only told him what he wanted to hear. For a man with everything, he often felt strangely empty. As he walked out of his office to head home, he stopped suddenly. He heard something unexpected, and music at first. He thought it was a recording left playing by mistake. But the sound was too real, too emotional. He followed the sound quietly, walking down the hallway until he reached the balcony that overlooked the lobby. There below him was the janitor, the same woman he had mocked just nights ago. Her eyes were closed, her fingers dancing over the keys like magic. Ethan froze, watching in silence. The melody was hauntingly beautiful. It wasn't perfect, but it had something his expensive musicians never had. Heart. Each note felt alive, raw, and honest. He felt something stir inside him, something he couldn't explain. For the first time in a long while, Ethan listened. Really listened. Lily had no idea anyone was watching. She was lost in her own world. Every movement, every sound carried emotion. When the final note faded into silence, she kept her hands on the keys for a few seconds, breathing heavily. Then she opened her eyes, wiping away a tear. "I still remember," she whispered softly. Smiling a little, Ethan's chest tightened. He didn't know what to say or do. He had laughed at her, insulted her, and yet here she was, creating something so pure and beautiful. It made him feel small, ashamed even. He took a step back quietly, not wanting her to notice him. He didn't want to interrupt that fragile moment. Lily stood up slowly, brushing her hands on her apron. She glanced around the empty lobby, her expression peaceful but tired. Then she picked up her mop and bucket from the corner and went back to her duties. As if nothing had happened, Ethan stayed where he was for a moment, watching her disappear through the hallway. The music still echoed in his head. It wouldn't leave him. It followed him all the way to his car. All the way home that night as he lay in bed. He couldn't sleep. He kept seeing her face, hearing her music. He remembered his cruel words. "If you can play better than my musician, I'll marry you." The line that once made him laugh now filled him with regret. How could he have mocked someone so talented, so full of emotion? He felt something unfamiliar, guilt meanwhile. Lily walked home through the quiet streets. The stars shone faintly above. She smiled softly to herself, her heart lighter than it had been in years. For the first time since her mother's death, she felt proud. She had played again. Not for money, not for fame, but for herself. It was as if her soul had finally spoken after years of silence. The next morning, the cleaning supervisor mentioned that someone had left the lights on in the lobby. Lily's heart raced for a moment, worried someone had seen her. But when she asked if there had been any complaints, the supervisor shrugged. "No, nothing. Just make sure it doesn't happen again." Lily nodded quickly, pretending to be calm. She didn't know that Ethan had already told the night security to leave her alone if she ever came to the piano again. He hadn't explained why, he just said, "Let her play." Something had changed inside both of them that night. For Lily, it was the rediscovery of her forgotten dream. For Ethan, it was the first time he saw true beauty, not in wealth or status, but in honesty. Neither of them knew it yet. But that small moment, a janitor playing in an empty lobby, and a billionaire listening from the shadows, would soon change both of their lives forever. The next morning, Ethan couldn't stop thinking about what he had seen. The image of the janitor sitting at his grand piano, her fingers moving gracefully across the keys, kept replaying in his mind. The melody she played still echoed in his heart. It was strange. He had been to countless concerts, listened to world-famous musicians, but nothing had ever touched him like that quiet, lonely performance in his own lobby. It wasn't just music, and it was emotion, pain and beauty woven together at work. He tried to focus on his meetings, but his thoughts kept drifting back. His assistant noticed his distraction. "Are you all right, sir?" she asked softly. Ethan nodded, pretending to look at his documents. "Yes, just thinking," he said, though even he didn't know what he was thinking anymore. Later that day, when everyone had gone for lunch, he walked into the empty lobby. The piano stood there silent, the same place where she had played the night before. He ran his hand gently along the keys, remembering the way her hands had moved, with passion and purpose. It was hard to believe that the same woman he had mocked so easily had so much hidden inside her. He sat down for a moment, pressing a few keys randomly. The sound felt hollow, lifeless. He laughed quietly to himself. "So this is what real talent looks like," he whispered. That evening, he stayed in the building again, hoping, though he didn't admit it, that she might return. Around 9 o'clock, when most lights were off, he heard soft footsteps echoing through the hallway. He hid behind one of the glass partitions. Feeling oddly nervous, it was her, Lily, dressed in her usual uniform, Carrying her cleaning cart, she looked around carefully, as if checking if the coast was clear. Then she walked toward the piano again. Ethan held his breath, watching from the shadows. She sat down, her back straight, her hands resting on the keys for a few seconds before she began to play. The sound that filled the air was different this time, more confident, more emotional. Each note told a story. She played like someone who had been waiting years to speak, and now that she finally could, she didn't want to stop. Her music started softly, almost shy, then grew bolder. The melody was sad but powerful. The way she played made the piano sound alive. Ethan leaned against the wall, completely mesmerized. The longer he listened, the more he realized something painful. He had judged her without knowing her. He had laughed at someone who carried more grace and strength than anyone in that room full of millionaires. When Lily finished, she sighed deeply, a small smile crossing her face. It wasn't the smile of pride but relief, like she had released something heavy from her heart. She whispered softly to herself, "That's better, Mom." Ethan could barely hear her words, but they hit him hard. He realized this music wasn't for anyone else. It was for someone she had loved and lost. He wanted to step forward, to tell her that her playing was beautiful. But something stopped him. Maybe guilt, maybe fear of how she would react after all. He was the man who had mocked her in front of everyone. How could he now tell her that her music had moved him? He didn't deserve to say it. Instead, he stayed quiet, hidden, listening as she packed her things and left. The moment she disappeared down the hall, he walked to the piano and sat down where she had been. He placed his hands where hers had just been, and for a moment, he imagined what it must feel like to play with that kind of emotion. He pressed a single key, listening to the soft note echo in the silence. "Who are you, really?" he murmured. The next day, he called in the head of security. "Do we still have the lobby cameras active at night?" he asked. The guard nodded. "Yes, sir. They record everything." Ethan hesitated for a moment, then said, "I want you to check the footage from last night, from around 9 o'clock. The guard looked surprised but didn't question him. An hour later, the guard returned with a USB drive. "You might want to see this, sir." Ethan plugged it into his laptop. And there she was, Lily, sitting at the piano, her head slightly tilted as she played. He turned up the volume, and the room filled with her music again. Even through the speakers, it was beautiful. He leaned back in his chair, feeling something stir in him, something new. He replayed the video several times, each time noticing new details. The way her fingers trembled slightly, the tear that rolled down her cheek, the small smile at the end. It wasn't just her music that fascinated him. It was her courage, her quiet strength that night. He couldn't sleep again. He kept thinking about her life, what had brought her here. Why was someone with such talent working as a janitor? He didn't know her story, but he wanted to, not out of pity, but out of genuine curiosity and respect. The next evening, he stayed even later at work. But this time, he didn't hide. When Lily entered the lobby, she froze, seeing him sitting on the bench near the piano. She gripped her cleaning cart nervously. "I'm sorry, sir. I didn't know you were still here," she said quietly. He stood up slowly and smiled, though she could see the nervousness in his eyes too. "Don't be sorry," he said gently. "You play beautifully." Lily blinked. Unsure if she heard him right. "Sir?" she asked softly. Ethan nodded. "I heard you last night," he confessed. "I didn't mean to spy, but your music, it was incredible." Her cheeks flushed with embarrassment. "It's nothing, sir. I was just—" He interrupted. "No, it's not nothing." His voice was firm but kind this time. "You have real talent, and I was wrong to mock you before." Lily didn't know what to say. No one had ever apologized to her like that. She looked down, her voice trembling. "Thank you," she said simply. Ethan smiled faintly. "Would you play again?" he asked, almost like a child asking for a story. For a long moment, Lily hesitated, then slowly, she sat down at the piano. Her fingers found the keys, and once again, the music began. This time, she wasn't playing alone. Someone was truly listening, not with arrogance, but with respect. As the soft notes filled the air, Ethan closed his eyes, letting the sound wash over him. For the first time, he didn't feel like a powerful billionaire. He felt human, moved, and humbled. When the final note faded, he whispered quietly, "You've got something special, Lily." She smiled shyly. "I just play what I feel," she said. And for the first time since that cruel night, Both of them felt something new, understanding that night. Two very different worlds met in silence and music, and neither of them knew it yet. But that single moment of honesty would change everything that came next. The next morning began like any other day, but something had quietly changed. Lily arrived early, as she always did, but her heart felt lighter than before. The memory of the night stayed in her mind, the moment when Ethan had listened to her play, not as her boss, not as a billionaire, but as a person he had actually apologized, and his words had sounded real. For the first time in years, Lily felt seen. It was strange, beautiful, and terrifying all at once. She cleaned the hallways, humming softly, and even the dull gray walls seemed brighter that day. The other employees still whispered about her, but she didn't care anymore. She had her music again, and no one could take that from her. What she didn't know was that her life was about to change in a way she could never have imagined. The night before, one of the security guards had been on duty when Lily played the piano. He was a kind man named Ben, who often stayed late to help her carry cleaning supplies. He had watched from the cameras as she played. Completely mesmerized, he wasn't trying to invade her privacy. But her music had stopped him in his tracks. It was pure emotion, so full of feeling that it brought tears to his eyes. Ben had recorded a short clip on his phone from the monitor, just because he wanted to remember it. He didn't plan to do anything with it. But later that night, when he got home, his teenage daughter saw the video and convinced him to post it online. "Dad, this is amazing," she said. "People need to see this." Ben hesitated. "She's just a janitor at the building," he said. But his daughter smiled. "Then that's what makes it even better. People need hope, Dad. This will inspire them." So, with a bit of guilt and a lot of admiration, he uploaded the video to a popular social media app with the caption, "The janitor who plays like an angel." By morning, the video had already started to spread. People were sharing it everywhere. The sound of Lily's piano filled phones, screens, and hearts around the world. The comments section overflowed with love. "This woman plays with her soul. I can feel her pain and beauty through the music. Someone find her and give her a stage." When Lily arrived at work, she had no idea what was happening. But Ethan did. His assistant rushed into his office holding her phone. "Sir, you need to see this," she said. Breathless, Ethan frowned. "What is it?" She turned the screen toward him. There on the screen was Lily, sitting at the piano playing with her eyes closed. Her expression full of emotion, the caption glowed beneath it. "The janitor who plays like an angel." Ethan stared in disbelief. For a moment he couldn't even speak. The video had thousands of views already, and the numbers were rising fast. He scrolled through the comments, seeing people from all over the world praising her. The more he watched, the more he felt a strange mix of pride and guilt. Pride because she truly was extraordinary, and guilt because he had once laughed at her by lunchtime. The video had reached over 1 million views. News outlets began calling it the viral piano mystery. No one knew who the woman was or where she worked, but everyone wanted to find her. Reporters began searching for clues, and soon, someone recognized the lobby, the marble floors, the golden chandelier, the logo on the wall. It was unmistakably the Ward Enterprises building. That afternoon, reporters began calling the company, asking questions. "Who is the woman in the video? Is she really one of your staff?" Ethan's phone wouldn't stop ringing. His assistant looked panicked. "Sir, this is going viral. What should we do?" Ethan took a deep breath. "Do nothing," he said. "Not yet." He wanted to talk to Lily first, to make sure she wasn't hurt or embarrassed when Lily found out. It was from one of the office workers. "Hey, you're famous," the woman said with a smirk, showing her the video on her phone. "You're all over the internet." Lily froze, staring at the screen. It was her, sitting at the piano, lost in her music. For a moment, she couldn't breathe. "Who recorded this?" she whispered, but the woman just shrugged. "Does it matter? People love you. Look at these comments." Lily's hands shook as she scrolled. Her heart raced between fear and wonder. Thousands of strangers were cheering for her. People were moved by her music, but she also felt exposed. That was her private moment, her safe space. And now the world had seen it. Ethan found her in the hallway later that day. "Lily," he called softly. She turned, her eyes wide. "Sir, I didn't know they recorded me," she said quickly. "I wasn't trying to cause trouble." Ethan shook his head. "No, you didn't do anything wrong." His tone was gentle. Your music. It touched people, Lily. You've inspired millions overnight. She blinked, confused. Millions? He nodded. Yes, millions. The whole world is talking about you. That evening, TV reporters were waiting outside the building. Wanting to interview her, people held up their phones. Trying to get pictures, Lily felt overwhelmed. She wasn't used to attention she wanted to hide. But Ethan placed a hand on her shoulder. Don't be afraid, he said quietly. You've done something beautiful. Over the next few days, things moved fast. Music schools reached out offering scholarships. TV shows invited her to perform. Famous musicians shared her video, saying they hadn't felt such emotion in years. She became known as the Janitor pianist, a symbol of hidden talent and hope. But while the world celebrated her, Ethan faced the other side. Reporters brought up his name too, digging into the story. Someone leaked that he was the billionaire who had mocked her before the video went viral. Headlines appeared. The billionaire who laughed at a hidden genius, from mockery to miracles, how a janitor won the world's heart. Ethan read the articles and felt the sting of shame. He deserved it, he had been cruel, and now the world knew. But he also felt something else, determination. He wanted to make things right. Not for his reputation, but for her. Meanwhile, Lily sat in her small apartment that night, her phone buzzing with messages from strangers thanking her for her music. She stared at the screen with tears in her eyes, whispering, Mom, I did it, they heard me. For years, her music had been silent, but now, it had found its voice again, and somewhere across the city, Ethan looked out his window at the glowing skyline, thinking of her, thinking of that promise he had made jokingly. If you can play better than my musician, I'll marry you. He smiled sadly. Looks like you won, Lily, he murmured. And I've never been happier to lose. Neither of them knew what was coming next. But the world had already fallen in love with the janitor who played like an angel, and their lives would never be the same again. The days that followed were like a dream for Lily. One moment she was just a janitor cleaning floors, and the next her name was everywhere. News channels, social media, even newspapers were talking about her. The video of her playing had reached millions of people across the world. Everyone called her the janitor pianist, and people said her music touched their souls. But for Lily, all the attention felt unreal. She still wore her same old uniform, still rode the same bus to work, and still cleaned the same hallways. Only now everyone looked at her differently. Some smiled at her kindly, others whispered when she passed. The same people who used to ignore her now wanted to talk to her. It made her nervous. She didn't know how to act around so much attention. To her, she was still just Lily. A woman who loved music. Ethan, however, saw this as a chance to make things right. Every night he watched the news, hearing people praise Lily's talent and criticize him for his past behavior. The guilt grew heavier each day. He couldn't undo the cruel words he had said at that party. But he could at least help her now. And deep down he wanted to, not out of pity, but because he truly admired her strength. One morning, Ethan called his assistant into his office. I want to arrange a charity concert, he said. Something that gives back to the community. And I want Lily to perform. His assistant looked surprised. Lily? The janitor? Ethan nodded. Not the janitor, he said firmly. The pianist, that afternoon. He went to find Lily. She was in the hallway, mopping near the elevator when she saw him approaching. She straightened up quickly. Good afternoon, sir, she said politely. He smiled, a real smile, not the proud smirk she once knew. Lily, can we talk for a moment? She hesitated, worried she had done something wrong, but nodded. They sat in the lobby near the piano, the same piano that had changed everything. Ethan looked at her, his tone calm and sincere. Lily, I've been thinking a lot about what happened, he began. About how I treated you that night at the party. I was cruel and I can't take it back, but I want to make it right. Lily stayed quiet. Listening, her hands folded in her lap, he continued. Your music has inspired millions of people. You have a gift and it deserves to be shared. I want to sponsor you. I'll pay for professional piano lessons. And I want you to perform at a charity event we're organizing next month. Lily blinked in disbelief. Me? Perform? She asked softly. Ethan nodded. Yes, you. You'll play in front of hundreds of people, the same way you played that night. You'll be the star. For a moment she couldn't speak. Her heart raced with excitement and fear. I don't know if I can, she said quietly. I haven't played on stage for years, and people, they only saw me play for a minute online. What if I disappoint them? Ethan shook his head. You won't. I've heard you play, Lily. You don't just make music, you make people feel. That's something even the best performers can't always do. His voice was soft but sure. Don't let fear steal this chance from you. Lily looked down, thinking. His words reminded her of her mother's voice. Never hide your gift, Lily. It's meant to be shared. She smiled faintly through her nerves. I'll think about it, she said. Ethan nodded. Take your time. But know this, you already have an audience waiting for you. That night, Lily sat by her small window looking at the city lights. The idea of performing again made her heart flutter. It wasn't about fame or money. It was about playing again. About reclaiming the dream she had buried long ago. She remembered her mother's face, the way she used to clap after every song. Play with your heart, my girl, her mother had said, and the world will listen. The next morning, Lily made her decision. She walked into Ethan's office nervously. Sir, she said softly, I'll do it. I'll play at the charity event. Ethan smiled, his eyes bright with relief. I knew you would, he said. You won't regret it. The following weeks were busy. Ethan arranged for her to practice with a professional music coach. She spent hours every evening learning again, her fingers stumbling at first, then moving faster and smoother as the days passed. Every note felt like a piece of her life returning. The coach was amazed. You play with emotion, not just skill, he told her. People will feel your story through your music. Meanwhile, the news about the upcoming charity concert spread everywhere. The headline read, From Janitor to Pianist, Lily to perform live in a charity event hosted by Ethan Ward. People were excited, some were curious, others skeptical, but everyone wanted to see her. On the day of the rehearsal, the grand auditorium was buzzing with activity. Technicians adjusted lights and microphones. Cameramen set up their equipment. Lily stood on the stage for the first time, looking out at the empty seats. It felt overwhelming, but she took a deep breath, touched the piano keys, and began to play. Her music filled the hall, soft and emotional. The staff stopped what they were doing just to listen. Ethan stood at the back of the hall, watching quietly, pride growing in his chest. He had seen many powerful moments in his career, but none like this. It wasn't just a performance, it was redemption. For her and for him that evening as the sun set, Lily walked home with tired fingers but a happy heart. She knew this was just the beginning. The world would see her not as a janitor, not as a viral story, but as an artist. She smiled to herself, whispering, Mom, I'm finally doing it. Meanwhile, Ethan sat in his office, looking at the concert posters on his desk. Her name printed in bold letters. Lily, the janitor pianist. He smiled to himself, thinking about how fate worked in strange ways. He had once tried to embarrass her, and now he was helping her shine. As he turned off the lights, he whispered quietly, Sometimes, life gives us second chances, and when it does, we better not waste them. Neither of them knew it yet. But the night of the charity concert would not just change their lives. It would touch everyone who heard her play, and it would prove that true talent, once found, can never be silenced. The night of the charity concert finally arrived. The entire city seemed to be talking about it. The grand hall was filled with people, business owners, celebrities, reporters, and ordinary citizens who had been moved by the story of the janitor pianist. Cameras flashed, the red carpet gleamed, and a large banner hung above the stage with golden letters that read, A Night of Hope, featuring Lily, the janitor pianist, backstage. Lily sat quietly, her hands trembling slightly. She wore a simple white dress, nothing fancy, but it made her look graceful and pure. A makeup artist had offered to help her, but she asked for only light touch-ups. I want to look like myself, she had said softly. Now, as she looked at her reflection in the mirror, she could hardly believe it was her. The woman who used to clean floors was now about to perform for hundreds of people. Her heart raced. She could hear the crowd outside, the chatter, the applause, the excitement building up. Ethan stood near the curtain, dressed in a black suit. Looking proud and a little nervous himself, he had organized dozens of big events before, but this one felt different. It wasn't about business or money. It was about something real, something emotional. He glanced toward Lily. You ready? He asked gently. She smiled nervously. I think so, she whispered. He nodded. Don't think too much. Just play like you always do, near from the heart." The lights dimmed, and the announcer's voice echoed through the hall. "Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Lily, the janitor pianist." The audience erupted in applause. Cameras flashed as Lily walked slowly to the piano at the center of the stage. Her legs felt heavy, her palms sweaty. She could feel hundreds of eyes on her for a moment. Fear gripped her. What if she made a mistake? What if people laughed? But then she looked down at the piano keys, and all the noise around her faded. She took a deep breath and placed her hands on the keys. The hall went silent, not a single sound. Then she began to play. The first note rang softly, clear as glass. It floated through the room and wrapped everyone in silence. Then came the next note and the next. The melody was gentle at first, then deep and powerful. The sound filled the hall like warm light. Lily closed her eyes and let the music take over. She wasn't thinking anymore. She wasn't afraid, she was just feeling. Every key she touched carried a piece of her story. The pain of losing her parents, the long nights cleaning empty rooms, the humiliation she endured, and the rediscovery of her dream. Her music told it all without words. The audience sat frozen, some with tears already glistening in their eyes. It was as if they could feel her journey through each sound. Ethan watched from the side of the stage, completely captivated. He had seen many performers in his life, but this was different. Lily wasn't just playing notes, she was sharing her soul. Each moment was filled with raw emotion, and the entire room could feel it. Even he, a man who prided himself on control, felt a lump in his throat. The song shifted midway, turning softer, lighter. The sadness transformed into hope. The melody danced with life and light. It was her way of saying, "I survived." The crowd leaned forward, holding their breath, afraid to miss a single sound. When she reached the final note, the hall was completely still for a few seconds. Then, as the last sound faded into silence, something magical happened. The entire audience stood up together. The applause exploded like thunder. People cheered, clapped, and even shouted her name. "Lily, Lily!" Some wiped tears from their eyes. Others smiled proudly. It was the loudest applause the hall had ever heard. Lily lifted her head slowly, stunned by what she saw. Her heart pounded so fast she could barely breathe. For a second, she thought she might cry, but instead, she smiled, a smile full of peace and gratitude. She stood up and bowed deeply. The cameras flashed like 1,000 stars, capturing the moment that would be remembered for years. Ethan stepped onto the stage and walked toward her. The audience continued clapping as he approached. He looked at her with genuine admiration. "That was beautiful," he said softly so only she could hear. She smiled. "Thank you." "Sir," she whispered. Ethan shook his head. "No, Lily. Thank you. You reminded all of us what real beauty means." The announcer handed her a bouquet of white lilies. Fitting for her name, she held them close. Feeling the warmth of the crowd's love, reporters began snapping pictures, asking questions, but in that moment, none of it mattered. What mattered was the sound of the applause, the joy in her heart, and the knowledge that she had finally found her voice again. Later that night, as the crowd slowly left the hall, Ethan and Lily sat together backstage, the energy of the night still buzzing around them. "You did it," Ethan said proudly. "You made everyone feel something tonight." Lily smiled softly, looking at her hands. "It feels like I was meant to do this," she said. "For so long I thought my life had no purpose, but when I play it's like I finally understand why I'm here." Ethan nodded slowly. "You have a rare gift, Lily, and I'm glad the world finally saw it." She looked at him with gratitude. "Thank you for believing in me," she said quietly. "Even after everything," he smiled. "I should be the one thanking you. You taught me something money could never buy." Outside, people were still talking, reporters writing their headlines. The janitor who touched the world with her piano. Social media was flooded with clips of her performance, comments pouring in from around the globe. People said they felt hope again after hearing her play. Some said her story reminded them never to give up on their dreams. That night, when Lily returned home, she placed the bouquet on her small table. She sat by the window and looked up at the stars. "Mom," she whispered softly, "I did it." I really did. Tears filled her eyes, but they were happy tears. She knew her mother would be proud. Meanwhile, Ethan stood alone in the empty concert hall, the piano still on stage. He walked up to it and touched the keys gently, smiling. You changed everything, he murmured to the empty room. Not just for her, for me too, for both of them. That night was more than just a concert. It was the moment their lives truly changed. A moment that reminded everyone listening that dreams never die. They just wait for the right time to be heard again. When the concert ended that night, the city couldn't stop talking about Lily. The videos of her performance spread across every platform. News anchors called her the voice of hope, and musicians praised her emotional strength. People said her music healed their hearts. But while the world celebrated, Lily sat quietly backstage, her heart full, her eyes still shining from tears. She wasn't thinking about fame or money. She was thinking about her mother, her struggles, and the long road that had brought her here. Ethan entered the room still in his black suit, a proud but gentle smile on his face. "You were extraordinary," he said softly. Lily looked up and smiled. "I just played what I felt," she replied. Ethan nodded. That's what made it perfect. They sat for a while in comfortable silence, the applause from the hall still echoing faintly in the distance. For once, neither of them needed to speak. They both knew something deep had changed between them. Respect, understanding, maybe even something more. After a few minutes, Ethan said, "Do you remember what I told you at the party that night?" Lily tilted her head, unsure. "The night I mocked you," he said quietly, "I said, if you can play the piano better than my musician, I'll marry you." He gave a sad laugh. "I thought I was being clever, but I was being cruel." Lily looked at him gently. "That was a long time ago," she said. "People make mistakes." Ethan shook his head. "Not like that. I was arrogant. I didn't see you for who you were, but watching you play tonight, I've never been more wrong in my life." His voice softened. "You didn't just play the piano, Lily. You played life itself." Lily smiled, her eyes warm. "You don't need to apologize anymore. You've done enough. You gave me a chance to share my music. That's more than I could have ever dreamed." Ethan looked at her for a moment, then said something unexpected. "The offer still stands." She blinked in surprise. "What?" He smiled slightly. "If you play the piano, I'll marry you." His voice was calm, but this time it wasn't a joke. The words were soft, sincere, and filled with admiration. Lily looked down, her cheeks warming. "Ethan," she said gently. "You don't mean that." He leaned forward, his tone serious. "I do. I mean every word. You've changed how I see everything. You've reminded me what truly matters." For a long moment she was silent. The lights from outside reflected softly through the window. She could see her own reflection beside his. Two completely different worlds sitting side by side. She smiled sadly and shook her head. "Ethan, I'm grateful for everything. But I didn't play to win anything, not money, not fame, and not love. I played for myself, for my mother, and for every person who ever felt invisible." He looked at her with respect, understanding what she meant. "You don't need anyone to save you," he said softly. "You already saved yourself." She nodded. "Yes, and for the first time in my life I feel free." They both smiled. But there was a quiet sadness in the air too, not of loss but of peace. It was a goodbye without words, a promise understood without needing to be spoken. The next morning the newspapers were full of headlines. Lily, the janitor pianist who touched the world. Her story was everywhere. Everyone wanted interviews, concerts, sponsorships. She received letters from fans, from children learning piano, from old musicians who said she inspired them to play again. Her name had become a symbol of hope. Ethan continued to support her behind the scenes, arranging her next performances, connecting her with music schools, but he did it quietly without showing off. He didn't want credit, he just wanted her to succeed. He often watched her practice from a distance, proud but thoughtful. One day, Lily found him standing near the piano after a rehearsal. "You've been avoiding the cameras," she said playfully. He smiled. "This isn't my story. It's yours." She stepped closer. "No, it's our story," she said softly. "If you hadn't said those cruel words that night, I might never have played again." Ethan chuckled. "Then I guess fate has a strange sense of humor." They both laughed, and for a moment it felt like the pain of the past had turned into something beautiful. Weeks passed, and Lily's first official concert tour was announced. Posters went up all over the city. Tickets sold out in hours. On the day before her first show, she visited the small park where her mother used to take her as a child. She sat on a bench under the old oak tree and whispered, "Mom, you always said music could change lives. You were right, it changed mine, that evening. Ethan came to see her one last time before she left for her tour. Are you ready for the world? He asked with a smile. She laughed softly. I think so. He looked at her with quiet admiration. You deserve everything that's coming. Lily. She looked at him kindly. Thank you, Ethan, for believing in me when I didn't believe in myself. He smiled and said, No, Lily. You always believed. You just needed someone to remind you. She looked into his eyes for a moment, then said softly, Goodbye. Ethan. He hesitated, then nodded. Goodbye. Lily, as she walked away, he watched her go. Feeling both proud and wistful, she had become something far greater than he ever imagined, not because of his help, but because of her strength a few months later. The concert halls around the world echoed with Lily's music. Crowds cheered her name and people cried as she played. Every performance was full of emotion. Every note carried her story behind a story of pain, courage and rebirth, and somewhere in the audience, unseen but always there, Ethan sometimes sat quietly, watching her play, his heart full, knowing that even though their paths had gone in different directions, their story would always be connected through one thing, the music. Lily never forgot where she came from. She often ended her concerts with a message to the crowd. Dreams don't belong to the rich or powerful, she would say softly. They belong to those who dare to keep believing. No matter how many times life tries to silence them, the audience would rise, clapping endlessly, and Lily would smile, her eyes shining. For she had proven something the world would never forget. That even a janitor, mocked and ignored, could rise to greatness if she followed the song inside her heart. And though the billionaire's promise had once been a joke, it had turned into something real, not a marriage, but a bond of respect. A promise between two souls who had learned that music and kindness can change lives. Lily didn't marry Ethan, but she did something far more powerful. She inspired him, and millions of others to become better, kinder, and more human. And as the final note of her music echoed through the concert hall one evening, Ethan whispered quietly from the crowd, You kept your promise. Lily, and she smiled as if she heard him, letting her fingers dance one last time across the keys, playing not for fame, not for love, but for the beautiful, unbreakable spirit that had always lived within her.